we, as a community, feel about Friendslop? I know, like, that one Twitter meme of that person calling the games where you have 4 people, you go out and do random, like, collect, calling it Friendslop. But those are the games I'm talking about. How do we feel about the lethal companies, the repos, the content warnings? How do we feel about them?
As I begin to get into the habit of posting monthly, I found it appropriate to talk about something else that happens almost every month. New game releases. Whenever a brand new game with a different formula comes out, it's a breath of fresh air, even if it's a little lame. It's become common for the game industry to be filled up with a variety of games, good or bad, due to indie devs who are pushing creativity and passion projects. Like Big Pig, shout out to Big Pig, the greatest game of 2025, Big Pig, I love Big Pig. There are so many games made by passionate indie devs that it'd be a lie to say that there aren't any good games to play, but with every work of labor, there is always a work of greed. And it's not a bad thing for a dev to want to capitalize off your game, especially if it's popular. The problem is when the game is purely meant to be a one and done trendy cash grab. This is where I can say the game is Friendslop. Hold on. Let me explain myself before you go into the comment sections to point out how I have no friends and using slop after any word is looser behavior. The term friendslop and friend farming was originally coined by user Wusaw in this f***ass tweet. I know, it's terrible. The way I interpreted this tweet is that it was trying to bring light to the type of games that bring friends together, or the type of games that streamers are constantly hopping around. Or maybe I'm overanalyzing this lame-ass tweet. The term friendslop is dumb, and I don't need to go super in depth with something so absurd. I think we should allow people to have their fun even if they just like wasting money on a game they'll only play for a few hours and drop forever. However, I think we can validate the term in a less lonely sounding way. To do that, I need a way to tier list all these types of games. What better way than using this tier list I found laying around? This tier list will help us determine which one of these games is considered friendslop or not. For this video, I'm going to try and use games that are either well known or relevant to the topic at hand, like Ultimate Chicken Horse. For those of you who don't know, Ultimate Chicken Horse is a party platformer co-op game where the goal is to make obstacles and paths to an objective that everyone is trying to sabotage. This is a game that's been around since 2016, so the fact that it's been around for a while probably implies that it can't be friendslop. Well, it has multiplayer capabilities, so it's friendslop. Duh. Alright, start recording. Next, we have Gary's Mod. You're probably wondering why I would put Gary's Mod in this tier list. You see, it's one of those games that friends love getting on with huge workshop lists and then drop it after a few days. But even if that doesn't speak for you, it still has multiplayer capabilities, so it's friendslop.
Whoa. You can't just say everything with multiplayer capabilities is friendslop.
Well, I was planning to call every game in the tier list friendslop for the video because it might be funny.
Well, that's stupid. You can't just say everything that has multiplayer capabilities is friendslop. Do you know how many games have multiplayer in it?
Ugh, fine. I'll be serious for once. I'm just going to clear this up now. A game that has multiplayer capabilities, no matter the goal, is not always friendslop. Games like Gmod, Overcooked, Ultimate Chicken Horse, and many others aren't inherently friendslop. It's not to say these games are super unique or groundbreaking per se, but the amount of effort and personality these games have indicates that it's not some game meant to be trendy and fall off a few weeks later. You know, these games are nothing like the best game ever, Big Pig. Nothing can top Big Pig. This brings up into question the very notion of what friendslop is. Are friendslop games just games that are intended to be trendy? I feel compelled to say yes, but it has to follow the typical co-op game trend. At the same time, I don't think it's fair to call every new trendy co-op game another slop copy. Co-op games have always been popular and profitable. Like, no shit is a developer gonna try and make a good game that people like. Science forbid a good game is made. Keeping all of this in mind, most of these games, despite having multiplayer capabilities, are not in any shape or form friendslop. So why is it even worth talking about them? Why am I making a video about this bullshit? Why are recent games coming out nowadays supposedly any different? Well, first, we have to look at the root of Friendslop games. I'm already tired of saying Friendslop. In the year 2018, the game Among Us was first released. Among Us wasn't necessarily a super popular game the time it came out, but it was seen as another fun game to play with friends. There's not much to say about the game Among Us, as it just followed a popular concept and gave it a unique twist. But how did that happen? How did the game get so popular and cause the focus on indie games to shift ever so slightly? Well, in 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic first struck, a lot of streamers needed things to play, as being stuck at home was a good incentive to stream. This led to streamers finding their golden egg. I can't do justice to how much influence Among Us had in 2020. Through 2021 alone, its influence was enormous. Everyone and their mama knew what Among Us was. Not only was it one of the most talked about and played games at the time, it made so much money, like a ton. Among Us showed the world how a simple game with a little bit of effort put into it can succeed well with the help of streamers and YouTubers, and pandemics apparently. Because of this, many devs saw the potential in making games that synergize well with content creation. It makes you wonder, what type of games are perfect for content creators? There is no want more easily fulfilled than the want for a fun party game, or an objective game where you just mess around with friends. Of course, there are plenty of other types of games that can fulfill a content creator's hunger. Content creators don't just have to play the same co-op games every single time, but why wouldn't they want to? Multiplayer games open doors for collabs and videos with other popular creators. Well, thanks to the influence of Among Us and many other games that came out after, no indie game had shaken the internet more than Lethal Company. Lethal Company is a survival co-op game where the goal is to collect items from strange locations across maps and make money. The appeal is that the locations you visit have a variety of strange monsters that you have to work around with your friends to survive. Because of Lethal Company's unique twist to an already fun concept, Lethal Company at one point reached up to 240,000 players concurrently. This might not seem as impressive as you'd think, but I should remind you that the game itself was developed by one dude. I'd say, for that reason alone, Lethal Company doesn't deserve to be classified as Friendslop. Despite the tweet using Lethal Company as an example, I believe it would be a complete disservice to assume that stands for an honestly decent game and developer.
Wait, so as long as a game has a twist on a pre-existing genre or formula, it's not Friendslop? It sounds almost as if your gripe with some of these games is that they're just unoriginal copies.
Yes and no. Games like Repo or Party Animals are high quality enough to be unique, but they do have a twist that makes them replayable. Though it needs to be clarified now that high quality does not equal good or original. For this reason, I could easily put Repo as not Friendslop, but Party Animals, not necessarily Friendslop, just right above Repo. It's a carbon copy of Gang Beasts. I don't think its intent was purely just to be a quick cash grab. You know what, maybe I'm wrong. Honestly, I feel as long as this video continues to go on, the meaning of Friendslop just continues to degrade. Let's just forget about the tier list. I don't think there's any way we can take the term Friendslop seriously. Well, I believe that you have to genuinely be trying to make a shitty soulless copy of a game. I don't think it's easy to be unoriginal, considering how much you can switch up. This leads me to believe that there are only 3 games that I can say with utter confidence are truly soulless attempts to make a quick buck off people. Those 3 games are known as Pushing It Together, Scary Cargo, and Roblox. These games themselves do look unique enough not to fall into the category of Friendslop, but Pushing It Together is clearly an attempt to capture what Chained Together accomplished in just a few weeks. It had a decent run, and even had huge creators doing weird IRL Chained Together streams. Pushing It Together is essentially the same thing as Chained Together, but like Sisyphus edition. Oh, and by the way, Pushing It Together absolutely failed. Don't get me wrong, the devs did try to give the game its own unique twist in the most uninspired jank way possible, but it had potential. The low quality and obvious attempt to recapture something that had already died down was probably what led it to its demise. What do I know though? I'm not a game developer. However, Pushing It Together is not the prime example of what Friendslop truly is. There are many more obvious cases than that. By the time I post this video, there might be more development updates for the game Scary Cargo. But let's be honest, if anything's Friendslop, it's this game. It's the most obvious, uninspired game by far. You guys are free to disagree about this, but this is so clearly a ripoff from Lethal Company or even Repo if you want to see it that way. Its graphics, judging from the cinematic, make me think of Lockdown Protocol and how it's just a glorified Among Us clone. But even then, Lockdown Protocol at least isn't as obvious or inherently Friendslop. I could give Scary Cargo the benefit of the doubt. All we have is a cinematic trailer that could probably be a poor representation of the final product, as it usually goes. I really don't feel like pretending that this game is trying to be unique. I think I even heard rumors that it used AI, but I digress. I believe that this indicates the possibility that games could end up falling into a more short-term content farming norm, almost as if it's taking inspiration from colorful YouTube thumbnails or short-form content. It's like all these devs know that their game will die and they'll just quickly switch to a new trendy topic. That's naturally something we want to avoid, but it's already happening with the repetitive mascot horror games or those PS2 graphic games, though mascot horror games are genuinely just content farms. There's no uniqueness to them anymore. It's every mascot horror dev's wet dream to have a YouTuber like Markiplier play their 10 million polygon model game. Somehow though, Roblox manages to do every issue I'm speaking about in this video without fail. Roblox itself isn't Friendslop. I could make a whole separate video about the issues regarding Roblox, but just to sum it up, it has become very common for there to be a lot of ripoffs of popular games on Roblox like Repo or Lethal Company, to the point where they just call it something stupid to avoid copyright law. They call it something like Lethal Business or some bullshit like that. I believe there was actually a Roblox game that stole some of the assets of Repo and just made a shittier microtransaction copy. This is one of the most common issues on Roblox. Roblox devs tend to stick to trends, just to try to get a bunch of money from unsuspecting kids. It's even more apparent when you try and join some of these games that follow trendy topics. They either instantly barrage you with pop-ups for you to buy an ultra piss coil, or they advertise a useless game pass. Of course, this is more of a direct copy issue with microtransactions, but they aren't exempt from using concepts from other games. I suppose that most of these games, Roblox included, will accomplish what they want. Create an easily profitable or Friendslop game that is uninspired, get content creators to play it, then give up on developing it when it loses relevance. I take it's not much of a surprise when most of these cash-grabbing games are abandoned by devs when it doesn't do as well as they're supposed to. Like, sure, the money can be an incentive, but some of these developers create actually interesting game but drop it just because didn't do as good as I expected. Ugh. There are so many games that became progressively better and more popular as devs continue to improve them. Like Big Pig Baby, the greatest game of the year, Big Pig, I love Big Pig! So is it too much to ask for developers to put a little more effort instead of making one and done games? Taking everything I've said with a grain of salt, I can confidently say that the term Friendslop isn't some complicated term that should be used seriously. I don't think it's clever slop to put the word slop after any term slop, as it'll just lose slop its meaning slop. I'm pretty sure slop already fully lost its meaning though. We have Pyrocynical to blame for that. I'm not going to ignore the fact that the world doesn't revolve around these low-quality 2-hour playthrough co-op games. They aren't the only types of games to exist, or the only issues prevalent in the gaming landscape. We gamers have to continue supporting developers who are actually putting in effort to make fun games for everyone. I know this is going to sound crazy, but supporting good games makes more good games. Look, I'm willing to accept that maybe it's not that big of a deal, and we should let even the low-effort copies have their chance to shine. Because, who knows, maybe Lethal Business is some hidden gem. I guess the lesson to be learned is that it's okay to make unoriginal, low-quality, expensive games in hopes that a YouTuber decides to make a video about it. But what idiot would be willing to talk about these types of games anyways? Alright. Okay. Yeah, you go ahead. You can. Oh, I'm still alive. Okay, that just hurt. Okay, I'm at 2 health now. This is it. This is it. All that.
Dude, that's so freaking cheap.
Okay.